Hello, this video is for the freshmen. This is for your fourth unit. The first quiz of your fourth unit, which is 4.1.4. And in this, you're going to be asking about making predictions about fiction. And either fiction that you're reading or fiction that you're watching or listening to. It's talking about a story called The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. It was written in the late part of the 19th century, so in the late 1800s, and it was about an invasion from Mars. So it's going to be talking about that, but it's also going to be talking about just basically stories in general. And whether you realize it or not, you start making predictions about a movie or book before you even start watching it or reading it. So what do you think about, what do I think about it? Well, what do I think it will be based on the cover or the trailer? What sorts of conflicts will the protagonist face? Those are things that you're thinking about even before you start watching. And as you read stories, and as you watch movies, certain details that might not seem important at the moment will matter later. Either it's foreshadowing or it's something important that influences the story later on. And what might these details mean in the story's context? We make predictions based on several things. Some of those things are the title. Like War of the Worlds, the title of that book, as soon as you hear that word, you're going to be probably predicting that there's going to be some sort of war involved or violence because of the title. The genre, which is the type of story that it is, will also be something that you'll use to make predictions. Where and when the book was published, the cover or the trailer, the blurb, the about author, all of those things help you make predictions about it. Now, the book, again, as I said, was written in the late 1800s, 1898, I think. But it was in the late 1800s for sure. And just knowing that can help you make the prediction that even it's science fiction, but it was science fiction at the time. It wouldn't be the same as our science fiction now. They were thinking that electricity was this big deal, and they had these laser guns, or they had these weapons that we aren't used to. That nowadays we would make our science fiction stories differently than they did back then, and so you would probably predict that would be the case. When you are preparing to read a story or watch a movie, it's perfectly fine to make predictions. That's very normal. And sometimes you're going to be wrong. Sometimes the author deliberately misleads us and gives us these things that are called red herrings, which are false clues. And so we think something's going to happen and it doesn't. And that's perfectly fine. That's part of storytelling. So sometimes the author deliberately misleads us, which is okay. And so we're going to make wrong predictions, but don't make predictions that are completely out there that have no context in the story. Like, for example, if you're reading, like, say, The Hobbit by Tolkien, which is fantasy, you don't want to say, well, I think that sometime later, Frodo's going to pull out a laser gun from his backpack and shoot Smaug. I predict that. Because you naturally don't do that, because there are no clues, real or fake, that lead us to assume that that's going to happen. So you don't want to make predictions that are completely unfounded. So the kind of story that it will be like are predictions that we can make based on the title and other things about it that give us clues. So what kind of story will it be like? What will the characters be like? When and where will the story happen? what might happen next in a particular place in the story. And if I were in that situation, what would I do? I really don't know what I would do if aliens invaded. I'd probably cower like a coward. But I don't know. Maybe I'd do something heroic. I've never been in that situation before, so I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to read something from the beginning of, let's see. Maybe not. Hold on. Okay. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning of War of the Worlds. And you'll be thinking as I'm reading what the author is wanting us to think of will happen next. Okay, so this is the beginning of War of the Worlds. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that human affairs were being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves about their affairs, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize a transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. It is possible that the infusoria under the microscope do the same. No one gave a thought to the older worlds of space as sources of human danger, or thought of them only to dismiss the idea of life upon them as impossible or improbable. So he's leading us up. He just starts this with this idea that, we feel happy and fine and safe, but something's coming, like that. And then I'll want you, and you do this on your own, read Imagining the Worst by Tom Rees, which is on Apex, and then think about what fears do people have now. Back in the late 1800s, people were worried about being invaded, and War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells was within the genre of that way of thinking, invasion literature. Think about what fears people have nowadays. What are we scared of now? And think about this. What novels and movies will come about as a result of COVID-19? That's something that kind of scares me a little bit. I don't want somebody I care about or to get sick as a result of that, or because of the result of it, not directly getting sick by COVID-19, but something else bad happening because of this, because of the quarantine. So anyway, something that might happen directly or indirectly as a result of COVID-19. Think about the context of a book in which it was written. When was it written, and how does that affect the way the story affected its audience? So what interested people at the time to make it popular? Think about the historical context of War of the Worlds. Back then, Britain was a big superpower in the world, but it was also feeling vulnerable to attack, and an attack by aliens was an especially scary thought. And so this fear led to a new genre, which I just mentioned, which was invasion literature. And War of the Worlds was one take on that genre. Nowadays, we have a popular subgenre of that, which is called kaiju, which is the idea of a monster coming out of the ocean and attacking a city. It's popular in Japan, and it's also here in America as well. Like Pacific Rim is a type of kaiju, is in the kaiju subgenre of invasion literature. But that's just interesting to think about. And hopefully that will help you freshmen with the first quiz of Unit 4, which is 4.1.4.